The story we are discussing today was written in 1976 in the middle of the emergency, although the emergency itself doesn't figure as an exquisite situation anywhere in the book. It's louder, okay. So this book here came out a few months ago. Professor Ananthamurthy had seen the final draft. We did an interview around the story, and he also wrote a note for the translation. But the book came out just a few months ago. And I suppose we'll see why the story was important to translate now, after 40 years after it appeared. Because a lot of his works have been translated. I shouldn't say a lot, but this particular story has not found much attention, even within Kannada literary discussions. Although it's been filmed in Kannada as well as in Hindi. If a film means a certain regard for a story, that hasn't happened here. Be that as it may, I'm delighted to have Vivek Shanbhag and Satchidanandan respond to the book. Before they speak, they just asked me before the session began that it might be a good idea for me to read a few excerpts from the translation. I've chosen some. So this part that I'm reading now, is the chief protagonist is an IAS officer who is a district commissioner, who means well. He wants to use his authority to do good for the people of the district. He's in his office. There was a sound. Satisha shut his book. Someone was knocking at the door. He kept open to let visitors access him directly without going through office procedure. Come in, he said. Tell him, sir. Please tell your peon that this door you wanted everyone to access is open to Bimoji as well. Unquote. Bimoji's affected manner was to make the peon aware that he was close to Satisha. Can you hear me? Noticing it, Satisha spoke with restrained cordiality. Please sit down, Mr. Bimoji. Bimoji pushed back the thick glasses on his nose. With eyes beaming under bushy eyebrows, he asked sardonically, hasn't our SP Sahib come to see you yet? Satisha was surprised that news of his order to search Gangadhar Swami's go-down had already reached Bimoji. Unwilling to yield to his inquisitiveness, Satisha replied, but I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Please forgive my impudence. Our district minister Rudrappa and his follower, our SP Sahib, consider Gangadhar Swami the most innocent and incorruptible leader of this district. Will you share my lunch, Mr. Bimoji? Thanks. Gangadhar Swami has distributed sweets among the children of our street today. That's the politics the supporters of your government are against me. Unquote. Satisha took out his lunch box from the desk drawer and opened it. Inside it were a couple of chapatis, an omelette, and slices of raw tomatoes. I forgot to mention the district is suffering under drought. This is a means of saying that the drought hasn't really affected the office of operation. His friends from the Air Force had brought the tomatoes and eggs from either Bangalore or Hyderabad. Slightly embarrassed, Satisha passed a chapati, half an omelette, and a few tomato slices to Bimoji. Another small excerpt. On his way home, he decides to stop by at a Gruel distribution center. And throughout the story, as a modern-minded officer, he's constantly reflecting on whether he's able to access the experiences of those who he's trying to help. So here it is. Rows and rows of people waited for their evening meal outside the Gruel center. Satisha parked his car at a distance and started walking towards them. Now the interior monologue. Had I starved like these people, I'd be holding an aluminum plate along with them and waiting my turn, depressed. It's only because I'm not in the line that I'm able to see all the rows. And therefore I'm able to think about hunger, drought, the waning of humanity, and what I could do to alleviate them. Their eyes swollen and listless, no one in the lines notices the shriveled hands and legs and the parched tongues trying to moisten dry lips. Satisha was not sure if his inner strength could increase to let him understand all that he saw. In an interior monologue, I have to be tough, both within and without. There is no other way. While inspecting the Gruel Center, Satisha became furious to see the multi-purpose food packets lying unused. He suspected that the officer was selling them on the sly. But the officer explained, if we add this powder to the gruel, people complain that it tastes bad, sir. No, it must be added, it has protein. Ensuring that the multi-purpose food was added in his presence, Satisha asked that the gruel be boiled for a little while longer. Resolving to set up a few more gruel centers, he got back to his car. Professor Satchidanandan, will you share a few of your responses?
He just let me know that he's reviewed the book for the Hindu. Please.
Yeah, in fact, we were told this morning that we have to discuss this book by Ananthamurthy. But mercifully, I had already read the book, and I did a short review for the Hindu, which is yet to be published. Bara, the title literally means drought in Kannada. So what fascinated me, like what will fascinate any reader of this book to begin with, was the multi-layeredness of the whole narrative, and also the way in which the word drought has found newer and newer meanings in the whole narrative. Because drought also represents lack of creativity. It can be impotence, barrenness, sterility, and all these meanings come through in the course of the whole narration. Because it speaks about the barrenness of idealism in the politics of our time. Of course, there is literally a whole district is under drought, and there is also a barrenness that slowly seems to creep into human relationships. Here, even a relationship which seems ideal in this novel, call it a novel or a story because it's actually a long story. With the relationship between Satisha and who is the protagonist of the novel, if there is a protagonist, and Rekha, his wife. It seems a beautiful relationship. They were in love and they had married because Rekha liked his idealism and fell in love with this man. But even that, towards the end, seems to become somewhat sterile. It seems to lose its meaning, its grip, its greenness, its original romance, and the kind of beauty that the relationship seemed to have had maybe at one point of time. So there are different kinds of barrenness, different kinds of sterility being invoked and addressed in the course of the book. That's one thing that fascinated me to begin with in the book. It also speaks of, as I have already said, the depth of idealism in politics. Not only in politics, even in the bureaucracy. Satisha is a bureaucrat, an IAS officer, but unlike many other bureaucrats, he is not very much, at least to begin with, enamored of his power. Instead, he would like to use his power to help people. As there are of course such officers, and Ananthamurthy himself says in the interview that Chandan, who has translated the novel, has done with him, that actually he was inspired to write this novel when he spent some time with the civil service officer, with an IAS officer during the emergency, and he found that this man was different. He was an idealist. He wanted to do good things, and Satisha is very much modeled on that idealist, that bureaucrat who really wanted to use his power for the people. So here Satisha tries to help. Because I will not go into the story, even though many of you may not have read the story, but the context is something like this. A district is the district where he actually asked for a transfer to is suffering from drought, and he wants to help the people. and he wants the government to declare the district drought affected, so that there is some extra help coming from the government, as is the rule that any drought affected state or part of the state should be assisted properly with grants and all that by the government. But he is unable to do that, to get it declared, because of the political rivalry between a local leader and the chief minister. And because the chief minister wants to see that the people turn against the local leader, because help is not really coming from the government. And if at all some help is given, he would like to get the credit for that. So he would rather open grievance centers across the drought affected area, so that the credit goes to the chief minister and not to the local leader. So because of this, Satisha is in a kind of dilemma, and then of course a lot of things happen, many of which are extremely relevant to our own context. In fact, I wanted even to read that portion. There is a cow protection group. This was written, remember, long ago in 76, I believe, 1976, much before the Gorakshaks were on a ruinous spree. So there is a cow protection group which is trying to protect the cows in the drought affected area, while they have absolutely no concern for the human beings who are dying. And so there is an argument between Satisha and one of the leaders of this cow protection movement. Govindappa. So he tries to convince Satisha that protecting the cow is the first thing, because cow is protective, cow is a goddess, cow is the center of agriculture in India, and so you should first protect them, and only then maybe you should think of the human beings and all that. So one central theme of the whole text is this a conflict between the idealism of the officer and the cunning, heartless pragmatism of real politics, what you can call real politics. I mean, the kind of the politics that is being practiced, which ultimately leaves the people poor, helpless, unassisted, and they do not even get the kind of help that they should be getting at that point of time. I mean, we'll go into other aspects soon, because I don't want to go on talking. I would like Vivek to take off and maybe illuminate another aspect of the fiction, and then we will get a conversation.
Thank you, Sachi. I think you have covered almost everything, but let me say a few things as a person who has read this in the original, because Sachi has read it in translation. This particular story is about 40 years old. And I think it also raises some questions. I read it again yesterday in Kannada. I've read the translation, but I read it in Kannada yesterday. And I think it raises a very important question. I mean, at least it raised that question in me. Why do we feel some works are relevant today? What is it that makes it relevant? What is it that brings that story alive? And what are those things that really stir us at something that was written 40 years ago? And there are many things that one can see in this particular work. It was written for a film. The particular story, and MS Satyu made this into a very successful film, both in Hindi and in Kannada. Sukha, it was called in Hindi, and Bara in Kannada. Look at the way the story opens, and there is a very powerful image where this IS officer is traveling in drought hit areas, and he goes to a small hut where there is an old woman sleeping outside, and he goes and asks her for water, and she says, "I will not give you water." And this is something that is in India. If somebody says, "I will not give you water," you can imagine what when I read it. I was a student when I read this, and I was stunned to read this particular sentence. When it came, she said, "I won't give you water." And then he says, "Please, a few drops are enough." And then she goes inside and brings a pot, and then she just turns it, and then it was empty. That is the first scene. That's how the story opens. There are many such things, many such images, many such metaphors in the story. There is one more very very comic but very profound scene. There is someone called Bhimoji, who is a small-time politician, but he knows he is very well connected with people, and all that. He lives in a very lower middle-class area in that particular town, thickly populated. So he had come to see this IAS officer in the morning, the part which Chandan read. So, and he doesn't treat him, the IAS officer does not treat him well. So in the evening while going home, he thinks about this, and being an upright officer, very idealistic, he feels that he should pay him a visit, and he goes to his house. And it's in a lower middle class area, and he goes in, and there is already, in 5 minutes there are hundreds of people, wants to give him some petition, wants to tell him, ask for some donation, some funding, this and that. And then suddenly his horn of his car, it starts blowing, and then he comes out and finds that there are, so many children have gone into the car because there was one window open, and they can't get out. And then suddenly, because it started honking, because somebody was pressed onto the horn, then there is the mothers, they panic. They start shouting, and everybody says that they think that the car will start moving on its own, so people go around trying to hold the car. It's a very comic situation, but I think it very powerfully reflects the core of the story, where the people are desperately, the whole thing is very absurd. They just don't know what the problem is and trying to resolve it, and unless someone comes and opens the door and it happens, they can't just get out of the car. It's a very very funny situation. Similarly, there is another image at the end of the story where this IAS officer, he has a study, and there is a description of the study, which is again very powerful. It in a way reflects that the objects that we have, that we use, that are around us, the room that the way we sleep, sit, all that matters. And in that particular passage, the whole thing has been depicted so powerfully that image doesn't leave you so easily. So these are some of the things that are there. The story is full of such images and metaphors, and through this he has built a kind of a bigger metaphor where the relationship between politics, the bureaucracy, the people, and idealism, everything is composed. So it's a very interesting story, not only from because it was written in emergency, not only from politics or other aspects, but also as a form of art. It is something that as a writer I was very impressed with, and something that something that needs some discussion. Yeah.
If I want to say why the story meant anything at all to me, as someone who was in the social sciences, sorry. When I read this story, after having been in social science for a fairly time, it just stood out that how this was an allegory of India's political modernity. It was trying to map out the ideological battlefield. The Satisha, the IAS officer, standing in for a certain left political thinking. He's educated in JNU, and then he runs into a Gauraksha that he mentioned, who is a right-winger. Then you have Bhimoji, who is a pragmatic politician who doesn't fetishize ideology at all. He's just thinking about how to get things done, and he has some sense for power. And then you have the people around who are, we don't know. In fact, there is a constant mystery as to what is driving them, and there are many, many scenes where you encounter them and it's not clear what is driving their sense of purpose. So the story that begins with an extraordinary conviction on the part of the IAS officer about how right he is in his understanding of what good normative conduct ought to be, his convictions come unraveled. And it's really an extraordinary way in which the story tries to show that the modes of authority in India are plural, and the modes of being are plural. Knowledge is plural. You have a water diviner who comes and guesses where the water source is. Defies all the engineers who've been trying very hard to find a water source. So there are many examples like this, and in a space of a 10,000 word long story, a lot is achieved. And there's also in his quest for being normatively sort of pure, he realizes it comes in the way of understanding the world around him, because things don't seem to fit into their measure of, if you care for equality, the people on whose behalf you care for equality don't seem to care for it much. And there are many examples of such a setting aside of a logical expectation from the part of a politically committed IAS officer. And it's done very powerfully, and there's a strong, this literary side runs alongside this other side which tries to pluralize things. And Professor Satchidanandan said it's the death of
Idealism.
It is the death of idealism, but as an opening for a quest for a new idealism, and it stops there. We don't know what form the new idealism has to take, but it's definitely pointing to the exhaustion of ideological the dead ends that there are. There's a quest for newness.
Yeah, there is also not so bleak, almost indirect kind of critique of the left in the novel. The left's failure to connect to the people, to understand the reality in all its complexity. For example, the caste. We very well know that if anybody who has studied the Indian left would easily know that one of the major silences of the intellectual left in India has been on caste, even though maybe there is a new awakening now because of the incidents around, but generally, caste is identified with class, and as a result, the complex mechanism that runs this inhuman caste machine has seldom been properly understood by the left. And here again, that comes through here. And also the JNU idealism, if I can call it so, because here the Satish Shah is a product of Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he's, sincerely he's an ideal. He really wants to do good for the people. But Bhimoji, who is not so good, not a great idealist, he's the one who understands the reality better, because he comes from the grassroots. His father was a tailor. His wife is also a tailor now. And I remember a context where he says that his father had stitched a coat for Satisha's father when he had to go abroad or something. So because he comes from the people and he has lived among the people, he knows all these the secrets of human relationships within the community, within the society. So he understands so idealism is with Satisha, but the understanding of the society seems to be more with Bhimoji. He seems to understand the society and its mechanism much better. There is also a portion in the book where there is a riot, and that again is ominously prophetic. Because this riot is artificially created, like many of the riots that have happened across the country in the past months or years. You find so somebody spreads a rumor that a Muslim merchant has a short dead or short some people who are trying to get the rice from his shop. And because he happens to be, what is important here is not that he is a merchant, but he is a Muslim merchant. And because he is a Muslim merchant, now it creates a kind of communal riot. and all the Hindu, the poor Hindu people turn against Muslims. It turns into a riot. It creates a terrible kind of situation, which leads to police firing, which in the beginning Satisha tries to prevent because he doesn't want it to happen. But finally, he has to silently concede to the SP's desire to, his order his order of firing. So there is also this connection between the police officer, the chief minister Rudrappa, and a hoarder, Gangadhara Swami, the hoarder. So the black market here, or the hoarder in the district, the chief minister and the SP, they seem to be connected. Satisha tries to get this SP transferred because he finds that he is not helping out at all in this situation of drought. But Pimoni very well knows that no, that transfer is not going to take place because he is very close to the chief minister, and the chief minister defends both of them. The SP and also the hoarder because he telephones the officer. Satisha says, I know you are a great idealist and all that. It's very good to be idealistic, but then, Gangadhara Swami is a very honest man, and so it's not proper to raid his his go down and get grains and all that. So a lot of connections behind the facade of idealism, the facade of political, the promises given by the government. So all these connections also get revealed in the course of the text. That again seems to make the text politically relevant.
Yeah, I think I talked about few images that really stayed with me. Let me share two more of them, which are very relevant and connected to what Satchidanandan was saying. There is a scene where it's the birthday of this IS. It's a birthday of IS officer's wife, her birthday, and there is another young Air Force officer who brings a cake for her, and this IS officer comes home, and they, then he cuts the cake. So it is the entire town there is drought, there is nothing to eat, and they celebrate their birthday there. And the important thing is that he is aware of this. He is aware. He thinks about it. He is self-critical. But he doesn't stop. He still goes ahead, cuts the cake and eats it, right? So that's something that image, stayed with me. I think this is something very important to the story, because it is not enough if you are aware about what you are doing and critical, because that is where that entire revolution ended, right? A revolution of the people, of this kind of people. And in the end, where there is Sachi talked about the riots. Just before the riots, a certain group of people, they start going from shop to shop, and they pull out rice and other grains, and they weigh and pay the shopkeeper. It is not that they are against hoarding, they are not looting, and it was being done in a proper organized way, and there was nothing. And till such time, as long as it was peaceful, the IS officer allows it, and at some point in time it goes beyond his control. And the book ends with a powerful image. When he gives the firing order, his son is in a school, and that's in the afternoon, and the school would have ended around 4:30, and that's the time when he gives the firing order. And he comes home, and he doesn't know where his son is. There is firing, people are dying, there is arson, looting all over the town. And then little later, his cycle rickshaw, he goes in a cycle rickshaw to his school, and that person who is a Muslim, he has taken that boy to his house and kept him, and then handed him over to the police. And the police inspector, SP, who is a corrupt SP, who brings his child back and hands him over to the IAS officer, and he tells him that your son is a brave boy. Right? It's a very haunting image, which is with which the story ends.
Say one more thing and then you can have
There's also a psychological concern running throughout about the stresses, if you will, of working with a normative frame, holding on to it across varying contexts. And Satish and his wife, who had fallen in love and also wedded to a certain social idealism, and are seeing everything around them, the school they sent their son to, the choice of, they're trying to be ecologically sensitive, they're trying to pare down the authority pretensions, wearing simple clothes, and a focus on the external rearrangement of authority relations has cost them a lot, and their relationship has has suffered as a result. And what Vivek just said, the cake cutting situation is he's forgotten her birthday, and they're really keeping these external rituals going, but internally things have dried up. And in the interview, Ananthamurthy said Yeats' lines had meant a lot for him, W.B. Yeats. And I'll just read out these 4 lines. It is, URA says, if you have one purpose alone in your heart, you become so stony yourself that you disturb the living stream. Yeats' lines have had a deep influence on me. I'll read out the lines to you. The living stream is full of desires and the other factors which go into samsara. The ideological people disturb that because they stay like a rock, and so the stream has to always find its own way. And the Yeats lines from his Easter 1916 poem. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone, to trouble the living stream. So I think in the current situation where a certain commitment on ideology as a means of grasping the world seems, this has been happening in the last couple of decades in academic discussions for sure. But I felt a story like this that had anticipated academic discussions, and so one of the other interests, if you will, of mine in doing this was to sort of complicate the research imagination that has set itself a certain trajectory of how you stumble upon a problem and how you address it. So I feel in Indian literature, writers like Ananthamurthy and others from other languages had taken on very important intellectual political questions which have remained apart from the bibliographical memory of academic discussions. So I'm just hoping this story or more stories like this will make for far more a richer referential field, if you will. She just told me you have 5 minutes left, and I'm sorry, I thought we had time until 11:45. I was mistaken, clearly. Bureaucracy, we've just inherited the colonial bureaucratic arrangement.
in a different way.
No, he's actually trying to say that the DC is not the way to do it. And secondly, the film errs in simply focusing on the social drama, which is why I think the story has to be read, because it moves back and forth between these inner reflections and the outer world. The film has no space for inner reflection.
But unfortunately, that's not the case.
So what is the new idealism that we are talking about? Can one define it?
There's a one line there, it says look inward.
But it's almost as if some soul searching is necessary and not a resort to ready-made formulas for political action out there. That seems to be what the story is pointing to. There are no clear paradigms.
I think if you, for any story, if you hear a storyline, many stories look alike, like a love story, for example. But what is different when you read it in literature is the experience that you get and what it leaves you with. So that's why I talked about many images that are there, that are throughout the story, and at the end it leaves you with certain experience, because that's why I said those images and those incidents have stayed with me. And what is it that it does to you? So of course there are many such stories. There are many. If you explain the story in one line, almost all the stories look alike. But the beauty of literature and each of these work, I mean not just this, anything, is different because it gives you a different experience. That's one. Second is it relates to your own experience, right? So when I read it, I feel it and connect with my own experience, with what I see in my, whether it is drought or whether it is his wife and his friend and whatnot, there are many other things. So I think that's my response.